So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode for the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast. And as you know, we promote four types of freedom. First is financial, second is location, third is time, and fourth is emotional freedom. So our aim is to bring on guests that are doing cutting edge, innovative work, doing things against the grain and changing the world. So today we have a very special guest. Is Dr. Sogol Pahlavan, and we actually have some of the same roots. We went to the same medical school. We went to Baylor, went to the same undergrad, Texas A&M, and she did her pediatric residency at Texas Children's Hospital. And she is a managing partner and founder of ABC Pediatric Clinic, established in 2008, which is an independent pediatric private practice. And she grew the practice from a 2-physician clinic to 8 provider, serving 10,000 patients in an underserved Hispanic community in East Houston. She's also served on a number of boards and administrative roles for the Texas Pediatric Society, the Texas Medical Association, also for the Texas Children Health Plan, as well as the Memorial Hermann Physician Network. And her passion is to serve the low-income community, where she created a pediatric medical home that focuses on providing evidence-based medicine and quality care for the underserved. And she's a strong advocate. So now she's actually transitioning, and she's been an advocate for all physicians to take the leap and embrace autonomy and independence and be free from all of these regulatory and administrative hassles. So she's also focused on mindful living. And today we're going to be talking about the role of finances, and she has a really unique message and the importance of mindful living. So without ado, we'll welcome Dr. Pahlavan. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. I'm honored to be on this podcast. I love you have to state your 4 freedoms again. Financial,
location,
time,
and emotional freedom.
And I love how you added that emotional component, because I have, in 13 years of private practice, going on 14 years, I have hit every single goal, right? Time and financial and personal.
Uh-huh.
But I think at the end of the day, the component that was missing for me was that emotional. And it took me 5 years to try to figure out why I felt the way I did. And so I love the fact that this space is coming more into, it's being more highlighted, especially by us physicians, because I think it's one of the root causes of burnout, right? In a sense. And so fabulous. I'm so excited.
I'm always interested in I'm using this platform to actually as a platform and stepping stone as a form of advocacy for physicians and for people suffering from chronic stress, fatigue, burnout, looking for options. And so we're so pleased to have you. So tell us, I'm always interested in the backstory. I'm always interested in how people came to be, for inspiration, motivation. So tell us your story and where it led you and what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I feel like physicians fit this typical description. We're driven, we're intelligent, we're hardworking, we're type A, we're organized. So we can say across the realm that every one of us is like that. So when we step into medicine, we come with those characteristics, right? And so I did, and I was super gung-ho, but kind of beyond my bandwidth. I immigrated to the US at the age of 10. So lots of challenges with, communication, cultural, social, family, finances. And my entire family, my dad moved here and he has 5 brothers, and they're all entrepreneurs. They all kind of created whatever field that they're in, from the from kind of the baseline, and then moved up and have their own companies in whatever field they're in. And so that's what I grew up around, right? So those were my mentors, and those were kind of that's just the way you do it. It's the American dream, right? Immigrants come over, and the American dream is just like to own whatever that you can have, because that's what America allows you. And that's what's so beautiful about America. So I went through, undergrad and med school and residency. And I actually, in residency, because I'm so hands-on, and I think I have undiagnosed ADHD, but I have so much energy that I wanted to do a fellowship, and it was between ER and PICU. And so I chose PICU because it was so much more intense. And I was like, oh, I loved intensity. This is great. And it was very procedure based, and I loved procedures. And so I applied. I wanted to move to California. I had been married by then. And I was a couple of months pregnant when I was interviewing, and I got into the UCLA program. And then I had my daughter in August of when we graduated. We graduated in July, and then I had her in August. And then reality kind of hit, like, oh, I'm moving away from my family. My husband's not in medicine. He's an attorney. He'd taken the bar. He passed it. But, salaries for lawyers there are less, and then cost of living is more. And so I backed out. I backed out in October, and it was horrible. And I felt really bad backing out, but it was the best thing that I had done for my family. And so I came, and then I stayed home a couple of months, and then I was like, well, I guess I need a job, right? I've had like so much training, so I need a job. So we got a part-time job at a wonderful outpatient pediatric clinic with my sister. She was in the same class as me as well. And then we worked for her for 2 years, and clinically we were a good fit, but administratively, just like any other physicians that goes into this space, like they love their patients, but they can't. There's a lot of the fit comes from the administrative component. Mm-hmm. And so my dad owns a Dairy Queen in East Houston, and he's owned it for like 30 years. And he kept saying, come, there's so many kids. And then we were like, we don't even know what, open up a business. I don't know anything, right? I don't know. Like, I finally got through with school. I don't know anything. And he said, come. And then my cousin had a building, plaza there, and he's like, I'll give you the space. And he gave us the space. He's like, I'll give you 6 months off, like free, whatever, come in, build it out. If it works, great. If it doesn't. And so we built it out, and we opened the doors, and the patients have not stopped coming with zero marketing. It's all word of mouth. And so for the next decade, and for those that are physicians that work with the Medicaid community, most of us work in like FQHCs and like these nonprofits that are funded by money from the federal government. We're just private practice, and we get 50% less than our private counterparts, the fees in Texas for pediatrics. I don't know what for specialty. So you have to run a really lean clinic, right? And you have to have like everybody working at the top of their scope of care, right? And so it takes a lot. And so those are in the past decade, like I worked crazy insane hours, because when you have a practice of yourself, it's like having I have 3 kids. So I'm like, this is my 4th child, because the phone calls don't stop, the bills don't stop. Like there's something 24 hours a day coming your way. Right. And so I think what happened is at the age of 40, I hit a wall, is what I call it. And I was completely exhausted, like beyond anything. Like I call it post-call fatigue, right? When you've done 48 hours or 36 hours at the hospital, like in the PICU, and you come home and you're like completely delirious and you don't want to get out of bed. That's how I felt from 40 to like 44, 45. I'm 45 now. And I couldn't figure it out. And, there were no resources out there. Like burnout wasn't a big thing. Like it wasn't, it was a thing, but nobody knew about it back then. So I was like, maybe I'm dying, maybe I have cancer, maybe I have some like a weird rheumatological disease, maybe I have chronic fatigue. Like, okay, this is how you're supposed to, maybe it's midlife. And it wasn't until I started just kind of reading. I started reading like self-help books and about like, what is the bigger picture, right? Because at that point I was financially right? Where I needed to be. I had checked off all the things on my to-do list, right? I had a family, I had a career, I own my own business, I was financially in a place where I didn't have to worry about things. And I'm not a person that spends a lot of money on like lucrative things. Like, so it wasn't like there was a lot of expenses going out. I was still living kind of the same way. And so I was like, okay, but like I am the American dream, but why do I feel like poop? Right? Why do I feel like this? And that's what was so mind-boggling to me. And so the message that I want to have for the earlier physicians, like early career physicians, is like you have to put yourself into this checklist that you have, right? Like you, yourself, your well-being, your health, your mental, because I feel like some of us are very good about like, I'm going to go exercise and I'm going to feel, and I'm going to eat well, which is a part of well-being, but your emotional well-being is something that we don't talk about often. And so if you are giving and giving, there's a point where you're going to go, there's not going to be any gas, right? It's like, you know, you're driving a car across country, you have to fill it up. So that is the message that I want. And you have to do it now. And I know the excuse is like, I don't have time. I have so much to do. There's no time in the day. I need 48 hours in a day. Make time, right? There's always time. If you even start with like 5 minutes, make time for that 5 minutes or 1 minute or 2 minutes. Start with something, because yes, you'll hit financial freedom and you'll hit personal freedom and you'll hit time freedom, right? But if you haven't really focused on your mind and your thoughts and your feelings and process so many emotions that we keep suppressing and we're trained to suppress during residency. If you have not processed those emotions, that financial freedom is not, it's going to give you freedom in your bank account, but it's not going to give you self-fulfillment in yourself.
Uh, that's a very, very poignant point. So I want to point it out to the listeners that you basically talked about, you reached the top and you had everything, and then you have this sudden aha moment, just looking around, and you're like, you know, why do I feel this way? You know, a lot of comments and a lot of feelings are, you reach the top and it's like, you know, is this it? You know, this is what I work for. You know, this is not what I dreamed of. So, and that's very, very common. So, you know, you mentioned a lot of good points about refueling, and really, as physicians, we are really going to the field to give, but the system just takes and takes from us. So we have to learn how to replenish ourselves and refuel ourselves so that, we can continue to serve and give the community. So I love that. And so please continue.
Yeah. And so what I say is, like you just mentioned, we give, but instead of giving, because when you give, it empties you out, right? But instead of giving, why don't we change the conversation to sharing? When you share, you are full, right? If full of knowledge or full of energy or whatever that is, what that container is. And so you're able to make a connection with whatever that you have, that piece of knowledge that you have or a piece of energy that you have. You're able to make that connection on a more balanced, right, scale, versus like, I'm just going to keep taking pieces of myself and giving it to you at the expense of myself, which is what we've been doing, right? So it's time that we start sharing. And how do you share? First, you have to fill yourself up, right? And then you don't even, sharing is a completely passive process, right? Giving is like, okay, I have to expend energy to give something to you. Sharing is literally like, I am in this space, and just by my presence, there's a ripple effect, and people can feel that energy of, love or whatever that energy that you want that you're sitting at, right? So it's like you're vibrating at a very higher energy, those energies of like happiness and joy and content and ease and patience, which is so against what we've been conditioned to and what we've been trained in medicine, right?
Uh-huh.
Our I've been reading a lot about the nervous system, right? Because I'm trying to, so when I started on my mindfulness journey, right, there were like, I would read books and it was very esoteric, right? It was very like woo. They'd be like, sit in the present moment, right? And I'd be like, okay, I dropped off my kids. I'm only working 3 days a week. So I have like these 2 days off. So I'm going to be sit in my present moment. And I would sit on the couch and I'd be like, I am present. But then like I am physically present on this couch. But what I didn't realize is that I needed to acknowledge what was up here in my brain. What were those thoughts that were ruminating right in my brain? So physically I was present and I had the time freedom, like freedom of time to like sit here, but emotionally and mentally I was so preoccupied, because even though I sat on the couch, right, strapped in the couch, like looking at the walls, right, it was like, oh, this employee and this physician and this kid's activity and what, all those crazy thoughts that go through our mind, right?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until, so that was one. And then the other component is recognizing your feelings, right? And then that's what's called the mind body connection, is your brain and your body are your feelings. Your mind is all your thoughts that you keep thinking. And that's why you have insomnia. And that's why you have, you're not sleeping and you're anxious. And those thoughts have a connection. Those thoughts actually create your feelings, and that feeling, you feel your feelings in your body, right? It's the energy that's in your body. So once I connected and brought awareness to like, what am I thinking, right? Like I have all this money, I have all this time, I have all these degrees, and I have all this like, titles and status and whatever, all these committee things. But like, what do I actually think about myself? And it wasn't until I dove into that, like deep, and I was like really open to where I was like, oh, that's not very nice. Like, and it was thoughts like, what can I do more? Is there more to do? This isn't enough. Oh, this person's doing this and I feel like I'm not worthy enough to do that, or they're ahead. Like all these insane thoughts about like competition and like jealousy, and which at the beginning, like competition is great, right? Physicians are very competitive, and we probably got into med school because of our competitive nature, right? We always wanted to be top of our class, whatever, president of this, save the world, all that kind of stuff, which is great. So I'm not saying competition is bad. I'm just saying at whatever point you have in your life, recognize where you are and then ask yourself, like, does this thing that I embody, like this competitive behavior, how is it serving me now where I am, right? Mm-hmm. And at that point, when I paused and I asked myself that, I said, okay, I can see like it served me great. Like I've gotten financial freedom because of it, right? Mm-hmm. I've gotten time freedom because of it. But now, do I want to move forward with that same mindset? And then some people might say, yes, I do, because I don't know, they might. But for me, at that point, I was like, I don't, because I'm exhausted, right? I'm in like an internal competition with myself, right? Because everyone that looks at you, like had looked at me from the outside world, was like, oh, you've got everything that you wanted. Like, please stop. Like most people would be like, please stop, right? Like, what else would you want? Why do you, like my husband used to tell me that all the time, like, oh my God, another project? Are we doing another project? Like, you need to stop your projects, right? It's very much about the internal dialogue that you have with yourself and asking questions like, where do I stand? What are my values? And your values they can change, right? They're dynamic, they're not static. And then the other component it is, okay, all these thoughts in my head that was all like competitive, go, let's conquer the world, whatever, more. And then dipping down, like falling down into your body and going down and asking like, okay, if I do want to go forward with this competitive like thoughts, how is my body feeling? And that's where, like, I was just blown away because to start out with, I'm MBTI, it's Myers-Briggs. What's the TI part of it? Anyways, the Myers-Briggs is certified. And so there's a portion in the Myers-Briggs, which is essentially like the way that you like make decisions and the way you operate in the world. It's like, are you a thinker or a feeler? Okay. And most of us physicians are thinkers, right? And so feelings were so foreign to me. I was like, well, I can't feel, because like when you feel, that's all like that mushy stuff. And then you can't, like, it gets in the way, right? So feelings, in my thoughts, my beliefs about feelings are weak, right? And so I was completely disconnected from my body. And it got to the point where I had the psychosomatic symptoms, right? I had chronic fatigue, which I didn't even think that was a feeling. I thought that was a disease, right? And then I had palpitations. And then I was like, oh, my palpitations could be, my arrhythmia. I've got a family history of coronary artery disease. So I kept linking it to like all these, putting on my like doctor brain, right? And linking it to all these like family history stuff. But it wasn't until I was like, okay, let's try to figure out like when I get palpitations. And I started linking it to like where I was in my day or what was happening during that week or during that day. And it all went back to like these stresses that I brought on to myself because of the way that I was trying to control the world, right? Physicians are very like, I have a plan and it's got to go this way. It can't go any other way. And when it does, it's like, oh, we get all stressed out about it. So I started journaling. I started writing my thoughts down. And then once I started writing my thoughts down, I was like, what is this? This is my thought that I thought about this today. How does this make me feel? And then literally like at the beginning of my feelings, I was like, good or bad. Like that was, I couldn't even identify with feelings. Like, what's the difference between like content and joy and bliss and like different spectrums of happiness? I was like, I don't even know what happiness is. Like literally, I was like, when I started on this journey a year ago, I was like, I want to feel joy because I don't even know what that is. Like I was in that space.
Right.
And the other part that was so, I think is so hard for physicians is that because we are looked upon as like our careers are very, it's a public service. And so, you're healing the world and you're making a lot of money, like all those perceptions of the world. There was a lot of shame for me to come out and be like, I feel like poop, right? Because people would be like, what do you mean you feel like poop? Like you have, this house and this car and this family and, your business, and like, how dare you say like you don't even have the permission to feel like poop, right? So I think a lot of us are in that space to where like, okay, like I'm so blessed, I'm so thankful, right? But there's still something missing and there's no resources out there to talk about this, number one. And there's a lot of shame because God forbid, if I complain, right? And this happens in like corporate, like, the big hospitals. I've never worked in a big hospital, but I've heard like people, it's like, oh, the doctor's complaining again. You've got it so great. Stop complaining,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
And so, to have these conversations and bring light to this and say, like, what I want to tell the audience out there is, if you are hurting, if you feel void, if you feel nothing, right? But that if you feel off, but you can't point out what it is, I completely understand. I want to attune and I want to validate that feeling, because we're hurting. Like, as physicians, we are hurting. A lot of us are buffering, right? So we hurt and we feel weird, discomfort. So I'm going to go drink. I'm going to go work. Our buffering is working. Buffering is doing something that takes the attention away from feeling yucky, right? Feeling discomfort, right? So we work. So I'm going to work more, and I'm going to be on more committees, and I'm going to leave and have my own private practice. And then when I have one clinic, I'm going to multiply it to 10 clinics, right? And then whatever, like all this crazy stuff, right? Or I'm going to be, work in academics, and then I'm going to be department program director and department chair, and then we'll move up, and I'm going to get my MBA, and then, right? And if that comes from a place of like ease and like comfort, and like, if that comes from that place, great, awesome, do it. I'm not saying like stop, halt, and sit at home and just kind of be a yogi and like meditate all day. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying like, understand what your intentions are when you're making a decision about your next goal or next step, because we're so goal oriented, right? And then put yourself in that equation, and you should be at the top. You shouldn't be number 2561 on your to-do list, because I was, and this is where I landed. And all the money in the world, all the time in the world, it's actually all the time in the world is counterproductive, because you have more time to think. And if you don't clean up your thinking, then that's going to cause a lot of the, the lower frequency negative emotions of guilt and shame and blame and whatever that you're feeling. Anxiety, lots of anxiety in us, right? And so, yeah, so prioritize yourself. Like, there's a lot of talk about self-care. One thing I want to point out about self-care is, if you plan self-care hours, let's say once a week, right? And your self-care is, I'm going to do yoga, right? Or I'm going to exercise, right? That's like totally self-care, right? I'm taking care of my body, with these movements, or, building, burning calories, whatever. But again, you have to look at the intentions behind that self-care. Where is it coming from? If you go and exercise, is the narrative in your brain, I want to exercise because I've got this, rolls in my stomach, and I've got flappy arms, and I'm overweight, and I need to lose weight to look better, right? Mm-hmm. How does that feel? Versus, I need to exercise because I love myself. I value myself, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to live a longer life, right? Or a more productive life with more energy.
Yeah, you've dropped so many gems, and very and for all the listeners, all of your epiphanies and all of your gems will be listed in the show notes. So thanks so much for sharing that. What resources did you have?
Yeah.
Books or podcasts?
Yeah. So I started 5 years ago when I hit this wall and I was like, there's got to be something out there. Let me look. Eckhart Tolle is my favorite author. I don't know how do you spell his name. It's like Echarttolle, something like that. But I started with, and I didn't have much, right? I didn't have time to read, right? That's what we tell ourselves. So I did a lot of like YouTubes, right? On my like commute to work, I just put on his YouTube. And so I watched him a lot and the YouTubes, and then I did audiobooks. So I would say if you are interested in kind of pausing and having that introspection and really finding out what's going on in your thought patterns and your beliefs and what's going on in your body and your feelings and how that's playing with another to create your experience, right? Don't look at changing jobs or changing partners or putting your kids into boarding school or like firing the employee. Look into see like, what am I thinking about these things and what are these thoughts creating for me? So Eckhart Tolle was great. Chopra, everybody knows Chopra. He was great. Wayne Dyer is another one that I started with. Ram Dass is great as well. So those are the 4 that I started with. And then I got certified as a life coach. So the Life Coach School podcast is a great one to start with as well. And then I have my own podcast called Mindful Living with Dr. Sogol. If you just like search SOGOL, because there's not that many Sogols out there on the podcast on iTunes, and iTunes is the bigger one, Buzzsprouts, and I don't remember the other ones. Yeah. I have my own podcast and I literally take you through all these tools, and my podcast is, so those like spiritual teachers are kind of, they're, if you're starting at like, healing 101, listen to my podcast because I break everything down and I give a lot of science. Joe Dispenza, his books are great too, and he gives a lot of neuroscience, right? So like he talks about serotonin and dopamine and cortisol and norepinephrine and the fight and flight. So those things I try to bring into my podcast because it's very a home for us physicians, right? And so it's not all woo-woo like out there stuff, which we can't connect with. So I would start with that. I am more than happy if you want to take this further, if you've listened to my podcast and you're like, oh, these tools totally make sense. Like I want to take this further, then I have coaching. I have one-on-one coaching, and it's specifically for physicians. And it's for physicians that have literally checked off their financial goals, personal goals, professional goals, and feel like poop or don't feel, or something feels weird off, they don't feel good. I'm more than happy. That is like that. My mission is to heal the physician community. Yeah. And that healing starts with healing yourself, because we are so conditioned to healing others and so conditioned to giving. And so for us to be able to share that compassion and that connection and that energy that we have, we've got to start with healing ourselves.
That's a wonderful note. And I know you have if listeners, you want to get in contact with you, is there a website or email or on social media?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I'm on I don't know why I have 2 different names, just because that's how weird my brain is. And I couldn't figure out the text. I gave up and did that. So it's Mindful Living with Dr. Sogol is on Facebook. And then my Instagram is Dr. Sogol _mindful living. But again, I think if you put in Sogol, it'll pop up. My email, if you go to, so message me, I check my messages through Facebook and Instagram all the time. And then if you go to my podcast, then in my show notes at the bottom is my email. It's super long. It's pahlavansogol@gmail.com, but you can just click on it. I do not have a website, just, I know, just because one of my beliefs is I hate technology. And so I haven't been able to grasp that part. I wanted to get my message out before getting bogged down into the details of like perfect website, whatever. And I love to talk. So I was like, podcast it is. I can just talk into a microphone and that's super easy for me. So a website will be coming on, but most of my material is on my podcast and Instagram and Facebook. And if you follow me, I have daily posts, and my posts are very much, I try to heal myself by sharing and telling my story. So it's very much what I feel for the day, or, you know, a aha moment I had for the day, or something that I did wrong that I wanted to share, but not beat myself up for it. So they're all very authentic stories. And that's actually how I started, because I kept looking at social media and I was like, we are not fine. We're not happy. We're not what all of these pictures show us as. And I got tired of it. Like, I got tired of having like these conversations with people that were just like, oh yeah, my job is good, my family's. I was like, no, that we're so much more than that. Like, that I wanted deeper conversations, right? I wanted things that were like really came from like the heart and like from the soul and your true like essence. And so that's what my social media is about. It's not about like perfect picture filter, blah, blah, blah. It's about like, even if I go on vacation, because I took my brain, what was my brain telling me during this awesome vacation at the beach, right? And bringing that to light and saying that it's normal, that we're all humans and we're not supposed to be happy all the time.
Exactly. Well, we've really enjoyed your time on the show, and any last parting words before we conclude?
Oh gosh, last parting words for me is that please take the time, whether that's 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, please take the time to yourself. For those busy moms, I recommend that time to be like in the bathroom when you're peeing, right? If that's, because that's what I used to do when my kids were toddlers. The only alone time I had was in the bathroom, in the shower, in my drive to work. Those were my like sanctuaries, were when the kids were younger, right? And journaling is so important, and just writing down what you're feeling. And so you can bring it into your awareness instead of keep pushing it and avoiding it and buffering it.
Awesome. That's so wonderful. You've dropped so many gems, and we look forward to having you on the podcast again.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity. This has been so much fun. I'm honored.